Welcome back to Scripture Horror. Picture this for a moment. The kind of snowstorm that shuts the world down. Cold, so brutal your engine won't turn over. Cold so deep, frost creeps along the inside of your walls. And in the middle of that silence, you notice something outside that absolutely should not exist. Tonight, I'm bringing you 6 true stories from Alaska that will stay with you long after the storm passes. These aren't legends or campfire tales. They're real people caught in real blizzards, facing real terror. A wildlife officer who realized the bears around him weren't just hunting, they were planning. A mother who watched children laughing and running through a whiteout until she saw they were dressed for summer in temperatures far below zero. Nothing about this is fictional. Real locations, real names, real fear. If you're new here, subscribe to Scripture Horror. We only share true horror. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's next, because trust me, you'll want advance warning. Let's begin, because when Alaska is swallowed by a monster storm, the cold isn't the most dangerous thing out there. My name is Jake Morrison, and what I'm about to tell you happened 3 months ago during the worst blizzard in Alaska's recorded history. I've been a gas station attendant for years. Not just any gas station, but the highway service station, the most isolated fuel stop in North America. We're miles north of Fairbanks, and for hundreds of miles in either direction, we're the only place where someone can get gas, food, or shelter. I've pulled people out of cars buried under snowdrifts. I've kept families alive inside our heated shop while rescue crews took days to reach them. I've seen firsthand what hypothermia does to the human body. I've watched grown men cry when they finally see our lights through a whiteout. Out here, my job isn't just pumping gas. Most nights, I'm the difference between someone making it home or becoming another name etched onto Alaska's memorial wall for highway fatalities. I always believed the cold was the real enemy. The storms, the isolation, the endless dark. I never imagined that the most dangerous thing wouldn't come from the weather at all. I never thought it would walk through my front door, shake the snow off its boots, and politely ask for something to eat. March started like any other severe weather day. The National Weather Service had been tracking the system for nearly a week. A massive Arctic front was pulling moisture from the Pacific, combining into what they described as a potentially catastrophic weather event. By late afternoon, the temperature had dropped past -40. By sunset, the wind was screaming with gusts over 60 miles an hour. Wind chill calculations stopped making sense. The computer at the station simply displayed the words, "Fatal exposure," in red. I sent my relief worker Tommy home early after the last truck convoy pushed south. Minutes later, Highway Patrol officially shut the road down. Emergency services suspended all operations. Even rescue helicopters were grounded. Anyone caught outside would be dead in minutes. Our station sat alone like a lighthouse in an ocean of white death. The main building housed the shop, a small kitchen, restrooms, and my office. We had a military-grade backup generator, enough emergency food to support dozens of people for a week, and heating systems designed for Arctic research stations. Even the gas pumps were enclosed in heated shelters with automatic de-icing systems. When people were freezing in their cars just miles away, this place was their only hope. I was checking the perimeter heaters late that night when I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. Not frantic pounding. Not desperate fists from someone freezing to death. Just calm, patient knocking, like whoever stood outside had all the time in the world. The security cameras were useless, completely coated in ice and whipping snow. Through the reinforced glass, I could barely make out a dark shape swaying in the wind. Someone was out there, somehow still alive in conditions that should have killed them almost instantly. I grabbed my emergency medical kit and unlocked the door, fighting the screaming wind as I pulled it open. A man stumbled inside. If you could even call him a man. He was the most emaciated human being I'd ever seen. His clothes hung off him like rags on a scarecrow, and his skin had a waxy, grayish color that didn't look like frostbite. But his eyes were alert, focused, and intensely hungry. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice dry and brittle, like wind through dead leaves. "I've been walking for so long. I'm very hungry." I helped him into a chair near the coffee machine and went to get him food. He wasn't shivering, which struck me as strange, but I assumed he was in the late stages of hypothermia when the body stops reacting to the cold. I brought him hot coffee, a sandwich, chips, and a hot dog from the roller grill. He didn't eat. He devoured. The sandwich vanished in 3 bites, then the hot dog, then the chips. Everything gone in under 2 minutes. When he finished, he looked up at me and smiled. That's when I noticed his teeth. They were filed down into sharp points. "More," he said softly. "Please. I'm still hungry." I brought him more food. Then more. Then more again. In less than half an hour, he consumed an impossible amount. Sandwiches, hot dogs, chips, cup after cup of coffee. No human stomach could hold that much, let alone digest it. Yet he never slowed down. His posture, his eyes, the way his hands gripped the food all told me the same thing. He wasn't full. He was starving. "Where's your car?" I asked, my voice tight. "How did you get here?" He paused mid-bite and smiled at me again. "I walked," he said calmly. "I've been walking through the storm for hours, looking for food, looking for meat." The way he said the word meat made my blood run cold. "What's your name?" I asked, slowly edging closer to the phone behind the counter. "I don't remember my original name," he said, licking his fingers with a tongue that seemed too long for his mouth. "I've been so many different people since I got really hungry. I tried calling for help, but the phone lines were dead. The emergency radio was nothing but static. The storm had knocked out all communications. I was completely alone with a stranger who had survived impossible cold and was eating everything in sight, yet never seemed satisfied." He wandered the snack aisle like he owned the place. "Tell me," he said casually, "how many people work here? When do they usually arrive?" Every instinct I'd developed over years of night shifts screamed at me not to answer. I told him it was just me tonight. No one else came in during storms like this. His eyes lit up with genuine delight. "That's perfect," he said, laughing softly. The sound reminded me of ice cracking under pressure. I backed toward my office where the emergency flare gun was stored. When I glanced at the security monitor, my heart nearly stopped. There were no footprints in the snow outside, none leading up to the door. The storm was bad, but it wasn't erasing tracks that fast. It was as if he'd materialized out of the darkness itself. "I want to tell you a story, Jake," he said. My blood turned to ice. I had never told him my name. He moved closer. His movements were wrong, too smooth, his joints bending in ways they shouldn't. His reflection in the mirrors lagged behind him like it was struggling to keep up. He spoke about a man stranded in a blizzard, about a family frozen inside a broken-down car, about hunger driving him past a line that could never be uncrossed. I reached for my office door and twisted the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The lock had frozen solid, something that should have been impossible with the heating system running at full power. As he spoke, his body began to change. His limbs elongated, his fingers stretched into black claws that scraped against the floor. Most horrifying of all, his chest became semi-transparent, and I could see his heart beating inside his ribcage. It was black, and it was beating far too fast. "You become something else," he growled. "Something that's always hungry." The old stories my grandfather used to tell me flooded back. Warnings from his village about people who turned to cannibalism in desperate times. About what they became afterward. He started naming names, workers who'd gone missing over the years. Marcus, Rachel, Tommy. My stomach dropped. Tommy hadn't quit. None of them had. They'd been killed, eaten. He lunged at me with terrifying speed. I barely dodged, grabbing a fire extinguisher and spraying it directly into his face. He stumbled back, shrieking in a sound that wasn't human. I ran for the storage room as he recovered, chasing me on all fours, claws scraping against the floor. I slammed the door shut and locked it just as he hit it. The metal shook under his weight. "I can smell your fear," he whispered through the door. "I can smell your blood." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in a red glow. Shadows moved under the door. Too many shadows for one creature. The door exploded inward. He stood there fully transformed, tall, skeletal, wrong in every possible way. I fired the flare directly into his chest. He screamed and staggered back, but the wound began to heal almost instantly. I smashed the back window and ran into the storm, knowing I had minutes before the cold killed me. I reached an abandoned logging camp just as my body started shutting down. Inside, I found a chainsaw and fuel. When he came for me, I saw faces inside his body. Trapped. Screaming. Tommy's face looked at me and mouthed one word. Fire. I understood. I soaked the building in fuel and lit it. As the flames consumed him, the faces were released, drifting free. His screams slowly changed, becoming human again. Apologetic. Broken. Rescue crews found me the next morning, unconscious in the snow. I survived. The station was shut down forever. I live in the desert now. I avoid the cold. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I remember what he said. Hunger never dies. And sometimes, it wears a human face and asks politely for something to eat. I specialize in Arctic installations, the kind of work most people think is crazy. Pipes that have to work when it's far below zero outside. Heating systems that aren't about comfort, but survival. Up north, heat is the line between life and death. I got into this line of work because my dad always said, someone's got to keep the heat running up north, and it pays well enough to make the cold worth it. I believed him. I still do. But what happened on December 12th, in the tunnels beneath Barrow Hospital, changed everything I thought I knew about what lives under the ice. This is my story, and it's completely true. Before that night, I thought I'd seen it all. Burst pipes in schools during January cold snaps. Emergency repairs on oil rig heating systems in whiteout conditions. I once spent 3 straight days fixing lines in an abandoned mining facility where the temperature never climbed above zero. My supervisor always said I was the one they sent when things were really bad, when people could die if the heat didn't come back on. I was proud of that reputation. I thought I knew underground spaces. I thought I understood what nightmares looked like. The call came in just after 2 a.m. during the worst blizzard Barrow had seen in decades. The temperature was pushing minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the kind of cold that kills you in minutes if you're outside without protection. The hospital's main heating pipes had failed, not just one section but the entire system. The head nurse on the phone sounded panicked. They had patients who wouldn't survive long without heat. I grabbed my emergency kit and headed out into the storm. The roads were barely passable, even with chains and 4-wheel drive. The wind felt like it was trying to shove my truck off the road. Snow came down so hard I could barely see 10 feet ahead. When I finally reached the hospital, the staff looked relieved but terrified. The building was already losing heat. You could see your breath in the hallways. The air had that sharp, metallic smell it gets when it's too cold for human lungs. Frank, the maintenance supervisor, met me at the basement entrance. He was older, experienced, but his hands were shaking, and not from the cold. He handed me a flashlight and a set of blueprints that looked like they'd been copied too many times. He said the main pipes ran through the tunnel system under the building, mostly crawl spaces with some larger sections. They could hear water running, but couldn't see where it was coming from. The blueprints looked normal. Standard underground hospital layout, maintenance tunnels under the foundation connecting to utility lines. Nothing unusual. I asked how deep the tunnels went. Frank shrugged and avoided my eyes. Maybe 40 feet below the basement. Built in the 1960s. Straightforward. Something about his voice made me pause. Years of experience had taught me when someone wasn't telling the whole truth. I asked if he'd ever been down there. He said once, a long time ago. Lost his flashlight. Got turned around. Never went back. I suited up in my cold weather gear and grabbed my tools. Pipe cutters, welding torch with backup fuel, joints, sealant. Everything I'd need to get the heat back on. The tunnel entrance was a narrow metal door marked maintenance only. When Frank unlocked it, the smell that rushed out made my stomach turn. It wasn't just cold air. It smelled like rot, wet earth, and something else I couldn't identify. Something organic and wrong. He handed me a radio and told me he'd monitor from upstairs. The tunnel itself was tight, barely high enough to crawl. I moved on my hands and knees, dragging my tools behind me. The concrete walls were coated in frost so thick it looked like fur. Ice crystals hung from the ceiling like teeth. I could hear water dripping somewhere ahead, but beneath that sound was something else. A faint scratching, like fingernails on metal. The cold down there wasn't normal. It cut through insulation and settled into my bones. My breath came out so thick it clouded my vision. The permafrost walls wept, melting and refreezing into patterns that almost looked like writing. After about 20 minutes, the tunnel opened into a larger space. I stood up and realized it wasn't on the blueprints. According to the plans, this should have been another crawl space. Instead, it looked like a natural cave carved into the permafrost. I radioed Frank. He answered, his voice weak and distorted. I told him the tunnels were bigger than the plans showed. He said maybe there'd been expansion over the years. I kept moving. My boots crunched on something that wasn't ice. When I looked down, I saw small bones scattered across the floor. Bird bones, maybe rats. The scratching sound got louder. My equipment started acting strange. Pressure readings spiked and dropped in impossible ways. My thermal scanner picked up heat signatures inside the walls, moving, warm-blooded, and big. The tunnel split into 3 paths, none of them on the blueprints. The air smelled like meat that had been frozen and thawed too many times. I followed the sound of running water. That's when I noticed the claw marks. Deep gouges carved into the frozen walls, about 8 inches long, 4 at a time. Too big for any Arctic animal. They looked almost human, but wrong. Twice as long. Fingers ending in points sharp enough to carve permafrost. Some marks were fresh. Some had dark stains around them. Then I heard the clicking. Not mechanical. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Like a language. Click, click, pause. Faster and more complex than Morse code. It echoed through the tunnels. I tried the radio again. Static. Frank's voice came through broken. He said it was dangerous. Told me to get out. Then nothing. I found the first pipe break in a chamber that definitely wasn't part of the hospital. It was huge, carved smooth, covered in claw marks that looked intentional, almost decorative. The pipes above had been deliberately cut, but that wasn't what froze me. The floor was covered in bones, human bones. Some old, some fresh, arranged in neat piles. All of them showed bite marks from something with multiple rows of teeth. I saw jewelry still attached to some of the remains. Wedding rings. A watch. A name tag that said Frank, but not my Frank. This one had been dead a long time. That's when I realized these tunnels weren't new. They'd been there for years, maybe decades. The clicking grew louder, coming from multiple directions. This wasn't one creature. It was a network, a system beneath the entire town. I readied my torch and tried to work, my hands shaking, my fingers numb. The breaks weren't accidental. They'd been sabotaged, cut clean through metal. The clicking stopped. In the silence, I heard breathing behind me. Deep. Slow. Too big. I turned my flashlight and saw it. It had once been human. Pale, stretched skin over an elongated frame. Arms too long. Fingers ending in black claws. No eyes, just empty sockets. When it opened its mouth, I saw rows of teeth like a shark forced into a human skull. It clicked, and other clicks answered. I fired at my torch. My name is David Parker. I was an Uber driver in Anchorage for years before what happened on November the 8th PA. The doctors here keep asking me to tell this story over and over. Like maybe if I say it enough times it'll stop being true. It won't. Some things that happen in Alaska during the worst storms don't follow normal rules. I need you to understand that first. I wasn't a paranormal believer or some conspiracy nut. I was just a guy who knew every pothole on every street in this city. I'd driven through dozens of blizzards, helped stranded motorists, dealt with drunk passengers trying to grab my steering wheel. For years, I thought the worst thing I'd ever face was a robbery or car accident. I should have quit driving when the temperature hit minus that night. The storm started normal enough. Thanksgiving weekend. Most smart drivers had gone home by Friday evening when the weather service started using words like catastrophic and unserviceable. But I wasn't smart. I was desperate. My ex-wife Sarah was threatening to take me back to court over missed child support. My landlord was talking eviction. My credit cards were maxed out. When surge pricing hit several times the normal rate, I couldn't walk away. My Honda Civic had studded tires and a full tank. I figured I could handle a few more rides before the city shut down completely. By PM, the temperature had dropped well below zero, and the snow was falling so hard my headlights barely reached a few feet ahead. That's when I got the ping that changed everything. A pickup request came in late evening. The location pin dropped in the middle of what looked like Elderberry Park. When I zoomed in, it was just an empty field. No buildings. No parking lot. Just snow. I tried to cancel, thinking it was a GPS glitch, but my phone wouldn't respond. The passenger had already been charged. My app showed the payment processing. Then the messages started coming. Please hurry, I've been waiting since... That should have been my first warning, but I assumed it was someone joking about how long they'd been standing in the cold. I drove to the coordinates, my wipers fighting the snow every second. My dashboard showed the outside temperature dropping even further, but somehow my heater was working perfectly. Too perfectly. The air coming from the vents felt warm enough to make me sweat. When I pulled up, I saw her. An elderly woman stood exactly where the GPS pin had marked. She looked maybe 70, wearing a long wool coat that seemed far too thin for the weather. Gray hair pinned back, wire-rimmed glasses. What bothered me wasn't that she looked normal. It was that she looked completely comfortable. No shivering, no urgency. She stood there like she was waiting for a bus on a sunny spring day. "Thank you for coming," she said as she got into my back seat. Her voice was soft and polite, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Could you take me to Willow Street, please?" "It's just past the old Woolworths downtown." I entered the address, but my GPS started showing a route that didn't make sense. It wanted me to turn down streets I'd never heard of, through neighborhoods that looked wrong on the map. Roads curved where Anchorage roads don't curve. Areas marked as empty lots suddenly became neighborhoods. I glanced at her in the mirror and asked if she was sure about the address. She smiled and said she was certain. She and her husband had moved there right after they got married decades ago. It had blue shutters. I couldn't miss it. I'd lived in Anchorage my entire life. There hadn't been a Woolworths downtown since before I was born, but I followed the GPS anyway, because that's what you do. The street signs looked different, older. Some were written in languages I couldn't read. My odometer spun faster than it should have. In minutes, it claimed I'd driven miles that simply weren't possible. She talked about her husband, Harold, who worked at the railroad yard. She said he'd be worried sick about her in the storm. Then she said something that made my blood turn cold. She mentioned how unusual the storm was for November, and said the bad ones usually didn't hit until after Christmas. She said Harold said it reminded him of the big storm when all those people froze to death waiting for help, including the poor Uber driver who got lost trying to help folks get home. Uber didn't exist back then. When I pointed that out, she just smiled and said there had always been drivers willing to help people get home, some longer than others. We reached her destination, a small house with blue shutters that looked like it had been built decades earlier. The style was completely wrong for the neighborhood. She handed me exact change. The bills felt thick. The coins were heavy and cold. She thanked me and walked to the front door, which opened before she reached it. A man in suspenders smiled at her from inside. I looked down at the money. The bills were dated decades ago. As I watched, they faded like old photographs left in sunlight. Within seconds, they were gone. When I looked back up, the house was gone too. Just an empty lot covered in fresh snow. My phone buzzed again. The next pickup was at Anchorage Memorial Cemetery. 4 passengers. A family. The pin was dropped between rows of headstones. The surge pricing was even higher now. I told myself I needed the money. I found them standing in the snow near a memorial wall. A man, a woman, and 2 children dressed in clothes from another era. Bell-bottom jeans. Wide collars. Fringe on the father's jacket. The kids talked excitedly about finally going home. During the drive, they talked about their lives. The mother mentioned stores that hadn't existed for decades. The kids talked about TV shows that went off the air long ago. Then the father talked about the accident. Thanksgiving dinner. Icy roads. Losing control. Everything slowing down, knowing they weren't going to make it. When I asked when it happened, the mother answered quietly, November of the H. Years ago. They were supposed to be home by... I checked the clock. It was the same date. the same time. When we reached their destination, they got out and walked toward a house that looked frozen in another decade. Just before they reached the door, they turned back. Their faces were wrong. Hollow. Pale. They mouthed a single word together. Help. Then they were gone. After that, the pattern became clear. Passenger after passenger. Victims from different decades. All lost to storms. My car aged with every ride. The seats cracked. The dashboard warped. The radio played stations that no longer existed. My reflection aged faster than time should allow. Then I started picking up people who had died that very night. Fresh deaths. Accidents happening minutes before I arrived. I realized I wasn't taking them home. I was delivering them to the moments they died, over and over again. I tried to stop. The car wouldn't turn off. The doors wouldn't unlock. My phone only connected to the app. Each completed ride drained something out of me. The passengers stopped pretending. They talked about being dead. About how cold it was. About how long they'd been waiting. "You're the ferry now," one woman told me. "Every storm needs one." The last driver served for years before finding a replacement. By morning, I received the final request. The pickup location was where I was parked. The passenger name was my own. The destination was listed as permanent assignment. I understood then what I was meant to become. I refused. I floored the accelerator and slammed into the concrete barrier. The crash should have killed me. Somehow it didn't. They found me days later. I woke up here. Fingers gone. Hair gray. Doctors baffled. They say it was exposure. Trauma. Delusion. They're wrong. I can see the dead now. The ones who should have been collected. I see them before they die. I warn people. I save lives. And every time I do, something inside me burns away. At night, when the storms hit, I hear my phone buzz. I see her face in the window. She reminds me the route is still running. Some jobs never let you quit. Some routes never end. And when the next blizzard comes, someone else will get that first impossible ride request. I just hope they don't break the cycle like I did. My name is Jessica Williams, and for 8 years I made my living watching rich people's houses while they escaped Alaska winters. The pay was good, the work was easy, and I told myself I was providing a valuable service. I was wrong about the easy part. What I discovered at the Bancroft place during the December blizzard wasn't just horror. It was the realization that some of us are willing to become monsters to survive, and others are just food. Here's what they don't tell you about houses sitting in Alaska. You're not watching the house, you're feeding it. The Bancroft job came through Sarah Chen, my regular contact at Premier Property Services. A month-long assignment over the holidays, double my usual rate. The owners were spending Christmas in Maui while I babysat their 12-bedroom mansion in Eagle River. Perfect for someone who doesn't mind isolation, Sarah said. She was smiling when she said it. I should have asked why. I drove out on December 14th as the Weather Service started issuing warnings. Historic blizzard incoming, they said. Temperatures dropping to 50, winds hitting 80 mph, duration unknown. But I'd weathered worse storms and flimsier houses. The Bancroft mansion was built for Alaska winters, triple-pane windows, modern heating, backup generator, everything a professional needed. Mrs. Bancroft met me at the door, an elegant woman in her 60s wearing enough jewelry to buy a small car. She walked me through the house with obvious pride, hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly, fireplaces in every room, vintage fixtures that belonged to museums. "The house has been in our family since it was built," she said. "It's very good at keeping warm." The way she said keeping warm stuck with me, like the house was actively involved in the process. She left detailed instructions about the heating system, generator maintenance, and emergency procedures. At the bottom, in different handwriting, was a note. "If house temperature drops unexpectedly, do not investigate. Call emergency number immediately." I laughed at that. What kind of heating problem couldn't a competent adult handle? I had years of experience with frozen pipes, electrical failures, generator breakdowns. That confidence lasted exactly one night. I woke up around 2 a.m. Absolutely freezing, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache. The bedside thermometer read 72 degrees. and I could hear the heating system running full blast. My breath was visible in the air above my face. In the hallway, the thermostat displayed normal temperatures, but ice crystals were forming on the inside of the windows. Not condensation. Actual ice growing on the warm side. I touched the heating vents. Warm air. But somehow the house was getting colder by the minute. That's when I started noticing the sounds. Every house has settling noises, but these followed a pattern, a rhythmic creaking that matched my heartbeat exactly. When my pulse quickened from the cold, the house's rhythm sped up too. When I slowed my breathing, the creaks softened. I went to check the basement furnace. Everything looked normal. Modern gas system, clean filters, no error codes. But the basement felt 20 degrees colder than the rest of the house. As I climbed back upstairs, the floorboards creaked in a deliberate sequence. ... Morse code. Then another pattern, JESSIA. The house knew my name. And it was calling for help. Outside, the blizzard hit with full fury around dawn. Power lines snapped, and the backup generator should have started automatically. I went to check. It was in perfect condition, full tank, good battery, but it refused to start. Not mechanical failure, just refusal. Like the machine had decided not to help me. Within hours, the indoor temperature matched the 50 outside. I piled on layers, wrapped myself in the expensive wool blankets Mrs. Bancroft kept in the linen closet. But this cold wasn't normal. It didn't just make me shiver. It pulled. Like the house was drinking the heat straight out of my skin. That's when I found the basement room, Mrs. Pyrus. Bancroft hadn't mentioned. Behind the furnace, a door painted to match the wall, almost invisible. The handle was warm to the touch, impossibly warm. Inside was a narrow staircase leading down to a hidden chamber that wasn't on any building plan. The air down there was tropical. Machinery hummed, not the furnace, but something older, stranger. The chamber was circular, carved from bedrock, its walls covered in brass pipes and gauges that glowed faintly from the heat. But what froze my blood were the 12 chairs arranged around a central boiler. Each chair had leather straps on the arms and legs and a brass nameplate. House sitter. Followed by dates spanning from 1924 to 2023. Some chairs were worn smooth. Others looked new. On a table sat a leather-bound logbook, different handwriting across the pages, spanning a century. The story stayed the same. Harold Bancroft had designed the mansion as a thermal harvesting system. He discovered something living in the hot springs beneath the property. Something that provided limitless heat in exchange for one kind of fuel, human body heat, drained slowly over days. The early log entries were scientific temperature readings, extraction rates, optimal cycles. Later entries grew panicked. The final one, dated December 21, was shaky, day 6. Can't feel my fingers. House is so hungry, always hungry. Next year they'll need someone new. Hope she's stronger than me. At the back of the book, today's date was already written in elegant cursive. Jessica Williams. Day 1. Thermal extraction commencing. My core temperature was dropping despite the heat. The brass pipes hummed louder, vibrating through the floor. The house was draining me, sending my warmth down here to feed whatever lived beneath. But I still had one advantage. The others didn't. I understood the system. The pipes carried heat downward. If I overloaded them, if I fed the house more heat than it could process, I might break it. I ran upstairs and began destroying everything flammable. Antique furniture, Persian rugs, silk drapes, priceless art all went into the fireplaces. I lit 6 roaring fires at once, feeding them until the flames painted the walls orange. The house fought back. Pipes burst, flooding rooms with water that froze instantly. Sparks showered from the ceiling as the electrical system died. The walls moaned like a living thing in pain. From the basement came an unearthly scream, not human, but close enough to make my heart seize. The floor trembled. The system was overloading, trying to balance heat and cold at once. I grabbed a poker and smashed every brass gauge I could find. Steam hissed, and something beneath the foundation shrieked like a dying animal. The air around me shimmered with heat waves. I could feel the entity reaching for me, trying to pull the last of my warmth away. My vision tunneled. My fingers were too numb to hold the poker. Desperate, I turned the main gas line wide open. The explosion wasn't immediate. I had maybe 5 minutes. I staggered to the front door as the floorboards buckled. I felt it, my life force being sucked backward, the thing trying to drag me into its furnace. The door gave way just as the house erupted. The blast lit the snowstorm orange. The mansion lifted off its foundation, collapsing inward. The scream that followed wasn't sound. It was vibration, pressure, pure hatred. Then, silence. A snowplow crew found me 3 miles away, half buried in snow, hypothermic but alive. My core temperature was 78 degrees. I spent a month in the hospital, 3 fingers amputated, toes black with frostbite. The doctors said I was lucky. But survival had a price. During recovery, I started having thermal hallucinations. Nurses would find me clawing at my skin, convinced something was still feeding. I could feel it, tiny threads of cold moving under my flesh, as if the house had left something inside me. The FBI investigation uncovered 8 decades of missing persons tied to that property. Beneath the ruins, they found the chamber intact. Bodies preserved in perfect condition, skin white as wax. Each one had died of hypothermia indoors. The current Mrs. Payos. Bancroft claimed ignorance, but financial records showed regular payments to thermal management services dating back to the 1940s. Phone records led to Sarah Chen's office. When agents arrived, the place was stripped bare. Security footage showed her leaving with 1 briefcase. She hasn't been seen since. Premier Property Services turned out to be one of many fronts companies across Alaska, Canada, Siberia recruiting isolated workers during winter storms. House sitters, pipeline techs, research staff. They selected victims using online profiles, no close family, desperate finances, minimal social contact. Perfect prey. The technology they recovered from the chamber defied explanation. Brass pipes and gauges built in the 1920s somehow capable of tapping geothermal energy and draining human heat simultaneously. The patterns. My name is Dr. Amanda Foster, and I need to tell someone what really happened during the February storms. The government made me sign papers, threaten my license, my freedom, everything. But people are dying, and they're covering it up. They call it climate-related wildlife mortality events. That's a lie. I've been a veterinarian for 15 years in rural Alaska. Not the kind with a nice clinic in Anchorage. I mean the real Alaska, where you drive 50 miles between neighbors and your nearest backup is a helicopter that might not fly for weeks. I chose this life because I wanted to help. Wanted to serve communities that had no other options. My mobile clinic became a lifeline for homesteaders scattered across thousands of empty miles. You learn things out here they don't teach in vet school, how to perform surgery when the power's been out for days, how to calm a panicked owner whose only companion might die in front of them, how to make life or death calls when the nearest hospital is further away than most people drive for vacation. But nothing prepared me for Tom Henley's call on February 2nd. The storm had been building for 4 days. The Weather Service was calling it a potentially historic blizzard, -70 with winds gusting over 100 miles an hour. Smart people stay inside during weather like that, but when Tom's voice crackled through my radio at 8:13 p.m., I knew I had to go. Doc Foster, you there?" His voice was shaking. Tom didn't shake. The man had lived alone, 30 miles from nowhere for 20 years, raising sled dogs. Nothing rattled him. "I'm here, Tom. What's wrong?" "Static, then. They're all dead, Doc. All of them. But it's God. I can't explain it. You have to come see this." I should have told him to wait. Should have told him to stay inside until the storm passed. But Tom had never asked for help before. Not once in the 10 years I'd known him. If he was calling, something was very wrong. The drive took 6 hours through conditions that should have been impossible to navigate. My mobile clinic is built for this. Reinforced chassis, emergency heating, full surgical gear powered by a diesel generator. But even with GPS and beacons, I got lost twice. The snow was so thick my headlights barely cut 10 feet ahead. When I finally reached Tom's property, my blood turned to ice. 12 dogs lay in the snow, arranged in a perfect spiral around the kennels, not scattered like from disease or poisoning arranged. Each exactly 4 feet from the next, forming an unbroken curve that spiraled inward to a single point at the center of the yard. They all lay on their left sides, heads facing the middle. Even through the blowing snow, I could see their eyes were open, glassy, staring at something that wasn't there. Tom came out of the cabin, and I barely recognized him. He'd lost maybe 30 pounds since last month. His skin had this gray, waxy tone, and his movements were wrong, too deliberate, like he was concentrating on pretending to move normally. "Tom, Jesus, when did this happen?" he said. "Found them this morning. They were fine yesterday." Ate, played, everything normal. Whatever did this happened overnight. I started toward the nearest dog, a big Malamute named Bear, but Tom grabbed my arm. His hand was like ice, even through my jacket. "Doc, before you touch him, there's something else." "Something I should have told you when I called." He led me inside his cabin. The air inside was freezing, despite the generator humming outside. Frost coated the windows. Deep gouges scored the wooden walls, about shoulder height, parallel, like claw marks. "Tom, what happened to your walls?" He blinked at them. "I don't remember making them." He said it so calmly it took a second to register. "Been having blackouts. I wake up and things are moved, sometimes broken. Yesterday I found raw hamburger smeared across the table. Don't remember taking it out of the freezer." I went back outside, hands shaking as I examined Bear's body. No external trauma, no bite marks, no blood. But when I rolled him over, I felt his abdomen swollen, wrong. When I pressed gently, something shifted beneath the skin, something alive. "Tom, I need to get him into the lab." Inside my mobile clinic, the air was warm, the instruments humming. As soon as I made the first incision, I knew I was looking at something that shouldn't exist. The cavity was packed full of worms, thousands of white translucent things, each the length of my finger, writhing in slow, synchronized waves. They weren't scattered. They were patterned, arranged around nerves and organs, like they were building a network. "A nervous system," I whispered. I drew blood samples. The blood wasn't red, it was pale, almost clear, and teeming with smaller versions of the same worms. But these didn't move randomly. They formed geometric patterns, triangles, spirals, shifting and reforming like living equations. When I increased the light under the microscope, they moved away in unison. When I warmed the slide, they clustered toward the heat. They were reacting together, collective intelligence. I turned to Tom. "Did you touch the dogs?" "Had to move a couple," he said. "Why?" I was already prepping a blood draw. The moment his blood hit the vial, I knew. It was thin, too pale, and moving. Under the microscope, my worst fear was confirmed. The larvae were in him, hundreds, maybe thousands, twisting through his blood. And then they began to form words, HELP, then WEARETRAPPED. Over and over, letters disintegrating, reforming, growing more chaotic. "Tom, how long have you felt different?" "Couple weeks. Started craving raw meat. Sometimes I wake up outside, barefoot, staring at the sky. There are footprints in the snow leading away from the cabin. Not mine." My radio crackled then, an emergency broadcast. "All stations, be advised, multiple wildlife mortality events across sectors 3 through 8. Unusual patterns suggest coordinated. Static. Then nothing. Satellite phone, dead. GPS, frozen." We were cut off. Then Tom's voice changed. He was mid-sentence when I noticed, his words overlapping, harmonizing. He wasn't breathing between them. "The cold preserves us," he said, and his voice came from two places at once. "We've waited in the ice for so long. Climate change woke us, but the storms bring us back. We need the cold to finish the cycle." His eyes had gone solid white, not cloudy, but bright, like light was shining out from inside. "Tom, listen to me," I said. "You're infected. I can treat this." He smiled, lips cracking. "Tom isn't here. He's sleeping while we use his body. Soon you'll understand." His skin glistened like frost. I grabbed a sedative, but before I could inject it, he moved, fast, inhuman. His hand clamped on my wrist. Hard, solid as ice. "Look outside," he whispered. Through the frosted window, I saw the blizzard twisting, not random, but spiraling, forming the same geometric shapes I'd seen under the microscope. The storm itself was alive. "We control the weather," he said. "We always have. The little ice age, The sudden freezes, that was us. We sleep in permafrost until the world gets too warm. Then we wake up and make it cold again. I drove the needle into his arm, but he didn't flinch. "Drugs don't work on ice," he whispered. Frost was creeping up the walls, across the instruments. The inside of the heated lab was dropping below freezing. Desperate, I grabbed my ultrasonic dental cleaner. If they communicated through frequency, maybe I could overload it. I turned the dial to maximum and aimed it at him. The sound was barely audible, but the effect was instant. Tom screamed, not his own voice, but hundreds layered over one another, dying in unison. His body convulsed. Blood streamed from his ears and eyes, black with parasite fragments. When it was over, he collapsed, still breathing, but gone. His mind erased. I checked my own blood clean. For now. But I could feel it, the air vibrating, charged, like before lightning strikes. The parasites were still out there, in the snow, in the storm, waiting. I did the only thing I could. I euthanized what was left of Tom and burned everything. His cabin, the kennels, the bodies. The flames fought against the storm, roaring blue and orange through sheets of white. I drove away, headlights cutting through the dark, not daring to look back. 3 days later, the government came. Men in unmarked trucks, masks, military gear. They asked no questions about Tom, took my equipment, drew my blood, and made me sign documents that erased the entire event from record. Cryophilic parasitic complex, they called it. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the lead researchers, slipped up during my debriefing. She said these organisms have been awakening all across the Arctic as the permafrost melts. Every outbreak follows the same pattern: sudden cold snap, synchronized animal deaths, hosts showing collective behavior. They're learning, she said. Each time they adapt better. They're getting smarter. I was reassigned unofficially to track similar incidents. Over the next year, I logged 14 outbreaks. Remote villages gone silent after storms. Hunters found standing motionless in snowfields, eyes white, mouths open, frozen mid-breath. Each time, the reports vanished from public record. But the patterns kept spreading southward, following the jet stream. Last month, I got a call from a school in Fairbanks. 18 children went missing during a blizzard, found the next morning standing in a perfect spiral in the playground. None remembered how they got there. Every one of them craved raw meat. I tested their blood, all infected. When I filed the report, they told me to keep quiet. Trauma-induced behavior, they said. But I saw the way the officials looked at me. Their eyes reflected the light wrong. Their breath didn't fog in the cold. They're in the government now. I can tell by the synchronized speech and conference calls, the perfect timing of their replies, the way they never wear coats. They've embedded themselves into the infrastructure, scientists, meteorologists, emergency planners, anyone who can influence weather response. Because this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about control. Each host they take makes the network stronger, more organized. They're preparing the final phase, trigger a new ice age. And when the world freezes again, they'll be ready running our systems, our communications, our rescue teams. Humanity will freeze in the dark while they thrive in their perfect cold. I'm writing this from a cabin 30 miles north of Nome. The temperature's been falling nonstop for 9 days. The aurora borealis has been visible at noon, pulsing in geometric patterns that match what I saw in the microscope slides. My radio picks up transmissions in voices speaking in unison, languages I can't identify. They know I'm here. They know I'm still clean. For now. If anyone finds this, know this isn't climate change. When the next ice age begins, it'll be them, the white worms in our blood, using our technology to build their frozen world. The cold they bring doesn't just freeze your body, it freezes your soul. Transmission ends. Recovered from Mobile Veterinary Unit 47, found abandoned 30 miles north of Nome, Alaska, March 12th. Dr. Amanda Foster listed as missing person. Investigation ongoing. My name is Marcus Taylor, and for 12 years I thought I understood what it meant to be a wildlife conservation officer in Alaska. I'd tracked wolves through the Denali wilderness, relocated brown bears from towns, and spent weeks alone in temperatures that could freeze engine oil. The Alaskan wilderness doesn't forgive mistakes. Out here, you respect nature, or it kills you. I thought I'd seen everything this land could throw at me. I was wrong. What happened during the January blizzard near Prudhoe Bay changed everything I believed about the natural world. The taste of that metallic Arctic air still wakes me up at night, and every time I see falling snow, my hands start to shake. I was stationed at Research Outpost Delta 9, monitoring polar bear populations in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The outpost was built like a fortress, reinforced steel walls, triple-paned windows, backup generators, and supplies to last 3 months. I trusted that building more than anything else. The reports that week called for the worst blizzard in Alaskan history, but I'd seen those warnings before. I told myself we'd be fine. On January 14th, the storm arrived like the wrath of God. The wind made the entire structure tremble. Snow slammed against the walls so hard it sounded like gravel. My thermometer read -82 degrees. The generator fuel was beginning to gel despite antifreeze additives. That's when the first radio transmission came through. It was buried under static, but I caught fragments, livestock attacks, strange fur color, something about blue-white pelts larger than any known bears. The hunter's voice cracked halfway through, raw terror buried beneath the distortion. Then the signal vanished. I'd worked with the local Inupiat hunters for years. Those people don't scare easy. Whatever they saw, it wasn't normal. To distract myself from the storm, I decided to review footage from my trail cameras. They'd been running for weeks, motion-activated, automatically uploading to the server. The early clips were routine, solitary polar bears, hunting seals, patrolling ice ridges. But halfway through, something changed. The bears looked wrong. Their skulls were elongated, jaws reshaped like predators designed for a different diet. Their claws were black, longer, curved like hooks. In one clip, I froze the frame and counted what looked like an extra limb protruding near the shoulder. It wasn't an injury or deformity. It moved on its own. Then came the video that stopped my breath. 6 bears moved in formation across the ice, not fighting, not competing. They hunted like wolves, flanking, signaling, executing coordinated strikes. Polar bears are solitary. They don't form packs. They don't plan. But these communicated. The audio captured low, rhythmic growls that changed pitch and patterns, almost like language. I ran a guide or countersweep around the outpost, thinking maybe something from the old DEW line radar station nearby had leaked. The readings spiked northeast, 3 times the normal background radiation. And then it clicked. I'd once seen a classified report buried in the archives. The DEW station was used for nuclear waste storage decades ago. The military had buried contaminated materials in the permafrost, assuming it would stay frozen forever. But the Arctic isn't frozen forever anymore. When I looked back through the footage, I noticed something even worse. The timestamps showed that the creatures had been circling the outpost for weeks. They weren't wandering, they were studying. Each day, one positioned itself in a different location, observing entry points, fuel lines, exhaust vents. They were learning. By evening, the storm had reached its peak. The wind didn't just howl, it screamed, a continuous metallic shriek that made my teeth ache. Ice formed on the inside of the windows. Then, with a deafening pop, the power went out. I switched to the backup generator and scanned the perimeter through my thermal binoculars. That's when I saw them. 6 massive heat signatures moved through the blizzard with perfect coordination. The largest stood nearly 12 feet tall when upright. Their body temperatures ran higher than any known bears, and they moved through the -80 wind like it was nothing. The Alpha approached the generator housing, touched the main cable, and with deliberate precision sliced through steel-reinforced wire as easily as fishing line. They knew exactly what to cut. I tried the radio again, dead. The storm was blocking all frequencies. Through the security feed, I watched them examine the building. One sniffed the ventilation exhaust, another pawed at the foundation beams, testing strength. They moved with methodical patience, probing every weak point. When the Alpha turned toward a camera and looked directly into the lens, the reflection in its eyes wasn't animal. It was awareness. Then came the sound. Around midnight, they started making noises that didn't belong in nature. Voices. Not clear words, but imitations of human cadence. My name. I heard my name. Marcus. Drawn out, distorted, like something trying to copy speech it didn't quite understand. The voices came from multiple directions, overlapping, whispering through the storm. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I fired emergency flares from the window, hoping the light and heat would scare them off. It worked for a moment. They retreated, then repositioned upwind from the smoke, adapting instantly. When I triggered the outpost's alarm siren, they located and destroyed the external speakers within minutes. These things weren't reacting. They were strategizing. At 3 a.m., the tearing began. Metal screamed as claws ripped open the outer panels. They peeled away the siding piece by piece, exposing insulation to the wind. Every blow of those claws sent vibrations through the floor. I could hear the generator laboring as the temperature dropped below -90. I realized they were dismantling the structure like engineers. They knew how to break it efficiently. They'd watched us build before, and now they were unbuilding me. My options narrowed to two: stay inside and freeze, or try to reach the emergency supply cache 5 miles south. The storm was still raging, but dying in the open felt better than being studied alive. I packed survival gear, strapped on snowshoes, and opened the emergency exit. The Alpha was waiting. Its silhouette filled the storm, massive, upright, blue-tinted fur shimmering under my headlamp. When our eyes met, it made a low, huffing sound. A laugh. I'll never forget that sound. It was mocking me. It had predicted exactly what I'd do. I ran. The cold hit like a punch to the lungs. Every breath cut like broken glass. My mask froze over within minutes, but I kept moving, stumbling through snow up to my thighs. Behind me, I heard them. 6 shapes moving in unison, almost gliding across the drifts. They weren't hindered by the terrain. They'd evolved for it. For an hour, I ran blind through the whiteout. Every time I veered off course to avoid one, another blocked my path. They communicated through strange clicks and growls that carried over the wind, coordinating like a tactical unit. When I reached the supply cache, my heart sank. The container was already destroyed. The door peeled open, its contents scattered. The satellite phone was crushed, the emergency beacon neatly dismantled. They had beaten me there. That's when the Alpha appeared again. It emerged from the blizzard like a ghost of muscle and frost, 12 feet of radiation-forged horror. Its fur shimmered blue, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Its eyes glowed with a faint, steady luminescence that hurt to look at. It circled me slowly, breathing clouds that smelled of decay and chemicals. I aimed my flare gun and fired straight into its face. The magnesium flare burned white-hot, bright enough to blind a man instantly. The creature barely flinched. Flesh sizzled, fur caught fire, and it only tilted its head, watching the flames like it was studying them. It was analyzing pain, learning. I fired the second flare at a puddle of spilled diesel near the generator remains. The explosion sent a wave of heat through the air, momentarily blinding everything around me. I ran. Somehow, I made it nearly half a mile before collapsing in the snow. The last thing I remember is the sound of the storm roaring and that laughter echoing somewhere behind me, closer than it should have been. The rescue helicopter found me 18 hours later, unconscious in a snowbank. Severe hypothermia, frostbite on both hands. I was lucky to be alive. The pilot told me they'd spotted a distant flare and risked a landing even though visibility was near zero. When I woke up in the hospital 2 days later, I tried to tell them what I'd seen. The investigation was quick and quiet. My report was taken, stamped, and buried under national security. Within a week, the region around the DE2 site was sealed off. The official story called it unstable permafrost and radiation leaks. They evacuated nearby research teams and brought in government scientists with hazmat suits and drones. Whatever they found, it never made it to the public. They transferred me south to Oregon to monitor black bears. It's a joke. I can't stand winter anymore. The first frost of the season makes me sick. I wake up some nights tasting that metallic air, hearing the crack of steel being torn apart. I still dream of those eyes. Intelligent, patient, waiting. Sometimes I talk to old colleagues still working up